The sun had begun its slow descent behind the hills of Attica. Warm golden rays spilled across the tiled rooftops of Athens, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers over the whitewashed walls of homes and temples. The streets, once echoing with merchants' calls and philosophers' debates, now softened into a lull as the city prepared to settle into the quiet rhythm of night. Inside a modest home nestled near the agora, a young boy named Themistokles sat cross-legged beside his grandmother, watching the flame of the oil lamp flicker. The scent of olive oil mingled with the earthy aroma of baked clay, and in the soft rustle of linen tunics, the household prepared for the slow unwinding that followed a long Athenian day. The preparation for bedtime in ancient Greece was never hurried. It was a ritual of release, from the toils of labor, the excitement of the market, the learning of the gymnasium. And as dusk deepened into night, the city moved with a tender quietness. Themistokles' father began his evening by wiping the dust from his sandals and placing them near the doorway. In Greek households, sandals were removed not just to keep the home clean, but as a gesture of peace, of leaving the noise and battle of the outside world at the threshold. The soles, worn from stone roads and sun-drenched steps, were set aside with reverence. They had carried him through the duties of the day and now deserved rest, just as he did. His mother moved silently around the small courtyard, gathering herbs. Lavender and bay leaves were pressed between her fingers, releasing their gentle scent. In ancient times, Greeks believed in the power of nature not only to heal but to comfort the soul. A sachet of crushed leaves was placed beneath pillows or hung near the sleeping area. Its aroma was thought to bring calming dreams, sometimes even messages from the gods. Themistokles watched with quiet wonder. Bedtime, to him, felt almost like a procession. Each act unfolding with purpose. The bronze wash basin was filled, not with hot water, but cool, drawn from the nearby cistern. One by one, the family would splash their faces and hands, washing away not just the grime of the day but its worries too. Purification was both physical and spiritual. In the eyes of the Greeks, cleanliness was sacred, a form of inner order and respect for the divine. Their simple supper had passed, bread dipped in olive oil, a few figs, perhaps a sliver of cheese or a bowl of lentils if fortune smiled. But dinner was not rushed. It was eaten with the same calm that now wrapped the house. Words were few. The murmuring of cicadas outside blended with the gentle clinking of clay bowls. Once darkness fully arrived, the home was lit only by small oil lamps, no torches here, no blazing hearths. Just the low, steady light of a flame protected by clay or bronze. Shadows danced along the walls, creating moving murals that told silent stories. Of gods, of heroes, of the lives of ordinary Athenians. Themistokles' grandmother began her nightly tale, a tradition that soothed minds and bridged generations. Tonight, it was the story of Hypnos, the god of sleep, who lived in a cave where the sun never shone. Poppies grew around its entrance, and the air inside was thick with dreams. As she spoke, her voice slowed to a melodic whisper, paced with the rhythm of the flame's flicker. Her words were not only heard, they were felt, like a warm blanket wrapped around the soul. In the boy's small sleeping alcove, his bedding was simple, a straw-filled mattress laid on a low wooden frame, covered with woolen blankets woven by his mother. Before he lay down, his father knelt beside the household altar, offering a short prayer to Hestia, goddess of the hearth. It was not just gratitude they gave, but a request, for peace in sleep, for protection from spirits that wandered in dreams, and for the strength to rise again with the dawn. Outside, the city's hum had quieted to a murmur. The torchlit guards of the night shift walked slowly along the narrow stone paths, their sandals scuffing softly. Dogs barked in the distance, roosters settled, and the owls of Athena, the city's sacred bird, began their soft hoots. Back inside, Themistokles curled beneath his covers, his body still, his breath steadying. Sleep, to the ancient Greeks, was not just rest. It was a journey to another world. One ruled by gods, visited by spirits, and filled with messages from beyond. It was not feared, nor rushed. It was revered. And so, with the comfort of family, the flickering of lamplight, and the soft, steady heartbeat of the ancient city around him, Themistokles drifted into sleep, just as his ancestors had done for generations. No clocks. No alarms. Only the eternal rhythm of nature, of night, and of dreams. The sky was now cloaked in the soft indigo of early night, and the warm stone walls of the home still held the memory of the day's sun. In many ancient Greek homes, the courtyard was the heart of the household, open to the sky, enclosed by rooms, and filled with the quiet rustle of olive branches or vines gently swaying in the breeze. Tonight, the courtyard at Themistokles' house was calm. A bronze brazier glowed faintly in the corner, its coals softly hissing from time to time. It did not blaze, it smoldered, sending up tendrils of smoke laced with rosemary, carefully chosen by his mother. Aromatic herbs were often burned in the evenings, their scents believed to cleanse not only the air, but the soul. The family gathered slowly. There was no command to assemble, no need for a call. The end of the day pulled them together naturally, as though each heart knew its place in the pattern of evening. Themistokles' father sat on a low stool, humming quietly as he scraped a piece of wood, whittling it into a toy for his son. His movements were slow and deliberate, matching the pace of the night. Nearby, his mother kneaded a small loaf of bread for tomorrow's breakfast, pressing her palms into the dough with the rhythm of ancient knowledge. Each press was a motion passed down from mothers before her, repeated, familiar, gentle. The dough gave under her hands like soft clay, and the smell of flour lingered lightly in the air. Themistokles traced a line in the dust with a stick, drawing the outline of a horse. He paused, listening. Somewhere in the distance, a lyre was being played, soft and mournful, its strings sending notes floating like feathers over the rooftops. Music, in ancient Greece, was a gift from the gods. Even in the quiet of dusk, its presence was sacred. A lyre's song was not merely entertainment, it was a pathway into calmness, to prepare the mind for dreams. The stars began to show themselves, timidly at first. Just a few glimmers, like shy thoughts peeking through the deepening blue. And above all, the moon rose, silvery and silent. Selene, the moon goddess, drifted across the heavens in her chariot, drawing her veil of cool light over the earth. Themistokles' grandmother, seated on a woven mat, leaned against the courtyard wall. She did not speak yet. She simply watched. Watching was an evening ritual in itself, observing the stars, the way the lamp flame curved, how the shadows of fig leaves danced on the wall. To be still, the Greeks believed, was not idleness. It was clarity. From a clay jug, his mother poured a small measure of wine into a shallow cup. It was watered down, diluted with fresh spring water. In Greece, wine was rarely drunk pure. It was a symbol of civilization, of moderation. Sipped slowly, it was thought to calm the body, soften the mind, and make dreams more vivid. The cup was passed between the adults. Each took only a little. They spoke softly, their voices like a chorus of distant waves. They spoke of the day, of the olives gathered and the merchants at the market. Of the temple offerings and the state of the harvest. Not gossip, not worries, just threads of life, gently braided into the night. Themistokles lay on a wool blanket now, his head on a small folded tunic. His grandmother began to speak, not a myth this time, but a memory. She told of her childhood, when Athens was younger and the world seemed even larger. Of her own mother, who would light a small clay lamp and place it beside the sleeping mat, saying it kept away dark dreams. She spoke of quiet mornings and long walks to the well, of singing with her sisters as they ground grain with stone. Of her first visit to the theater, when the great tragedians spoke with thunder in their voices and tears in their eyes. Her words flowed like water, and Themistokles' eyes slowly blinked heavier. Above them, the stars now blanketed the sky. The great bear turned slowly. Orion rested on the horizon. The Greeks had names and stories for every shape above them. The stars were not just lights, they were ancient memories written across the heavens. To sleep beneath them was to sleep under the watchful gaze of history itself. The coals in the brazier dimmed further. One by one, the family drifted away from the courtyard. Themistokles' father stood last, carefully picking up the carving he had worked on, a small wooden horse, not yet finished. He touched his son's forehead gently with the back of his fingers, whispering a few words in praise of Hypnos. Not loud. Not even audible to all. Just a father's hush of love, passed from breath to skin. Inside, the home had cooled. The stone floors breathed out the last of their heat. Lamps were dimmed. Doors closed with a whisper. The night had fully arrived now, not to be conquered, but to be embraced. Themistokles, still curled in his blanket, stared for a moment at the moon through the open courtyard. Its light touched his face like a mother's hand. Sleep came not as a surprise, but as a welcome guest. It came with footsteps as soft as silk. With breaths as deep as the ocean. And soon, even the crickets quieted. Even the wind paused. All that remained was the rhythm of ancient breath, the stillness of peaceful dreams, and the hush of a city that knew how to rest. The sky outside had deepened into velvet. Stars shimmered overhead like pearls scattered across dark silk, and in every quiet Athenian home, the final rituals of the day continued gently, like ripples across a still pond. Inside the stone house of Themistokles, the scent of warm olive oil still lingered. The courtyard was now empty, and the household's attention turned inward, toward the quiet spaces of rest and care. One such space, a small, rounded room with a smooth stone floor and a bronze basin, waited in flickering lamplight. This was the bathing room, not large or elaborate, but sacred in its simplicity. Evening bathing in ancient Greece was not a loud affair. It was a slow, peaceful cleansing, a ritual that prepared the body not just for sleep, but for renewal. Cleanliness was a virtue to the Greeks. It was considered a sign of respect for the gods and the natural order. In the calm of twilight, Themistokles' mother prepared the bathwater with care, her hands practiced in movements learned from her own mother and grandmother. The water was never scalding. Heated slightly over coals, it was poured slowly into the bronze basin until the steam curled upward like faint whispers. Themistokles stood quietly as his mother dipped a cloth into the water and gently wiped the dust from his arms, his face, his legs. He did not squirm or rush. The warmth of the cloth was soothing, the smell of the soap, made from ash and oil, was faint, earthy, familiar. Each pass of the cloth was a message: you are safe now. You are clean. You may rest. There were no elaborate perfumes or soaps, only natural things, simple, clean, grounding. A few crushed leaves of myrtle, maybe a touch of honey added to the oil. These were luxuries, but used sparingly. The act of bathing was less about decoration and more about restoration. After the gentle wash, Themistokles was rubbed down with soft linen and olive oil. A small amphora stood nearby, filled with the golden-green liquid harvested from their own grove. Just a few drops were poured into a dish, and his mother's hands warmed it before spreading it gently over his skin. The oil softened the body and soothed the muscles, a gift from Athena herself, goddess of wisdom and olive trees. Oil was not just for the rich or the warriors. It was used by everyone. It protected the skin from the sun, helped heal wounds, and, in this hour, acted as a balm of comfort. Themistokles' small frame glistened slightly in the lamplight, his skin now calm, his breath slower. His father entered quietly, carrying a second basin for his own evening wash. There were no pipes or flowing fountains here, just jugs, bowls, and patience. He knelt by the flame and ladled water over his shoulders, gasping softly at the coolness, then smiling. The washing was meditative. A time to reflect. A time to let the noise of the day dissolve into the silence of night. Themistokles sat nearby now, wrapped in a simple wool cloth, watching the flame dance in the oil lamp's glass. The shadows on the wall moved like gentle spirits, never sharp, never sudden. In this moment, the home felt like a shell wrapped around the family, a space carved out of time, meant only for peace. His grandmother entered last, slow but steady. Her steps were light, her face creased with years but softened with wisdom. She poured herself a small measure of water and dabbed her wrists and forehead, murmuring a prayer to Hygeia, the goddess of cleanliness and good health. Not loud, not performative. Just a whisper of thanks and a request for peaceful sleep. As the last drops of water dried on the stone floor, the family's bodies were clean, oiled, relaxed. They moved now with the grace of sleepwalkers, slow, careful, floating on the quiet of the hour. No torches blazed. No words were shouted. Even the children understood this sacred time. In the sleeping space, Themistokles lay down once more. His mat had been fluffed and his blanket warmed by the brazier. Beside him, his small clay lamp burned low, just enough to cast a golden pool around his resting face. In his hand, he still held a small wooden horse, unfinished, yet perfect. His mother sat beside him for a moment more. She ran her fingers through his hair gently, humming an old melody from her village. It was not a song with words, just a pattern of notes that rose and fell like waves, or like the rocking of a boat. It lulled him, drew his eyes shut. Outside the house, the night deepened. A dog barked once, far away. Somewhere in the distance, a priest finished a hymn at a small altar. And in the hills beyond, the sound of sheep bells tinkled faintly as shepherds made their final rounds. Inside, the family slowly lowered themselves onto mats, benches, and woven blankets. The fire was left to die, the coals a soft red now. The lamps were dimmed one by one, until only moonlight filtered through the doorway. In the dark, the sound of steady breathing filled the space. The house, like many in Athens, had slipped into sacred sleep, not as escape, but as renewal. And in the quietness, the family floated gently in Hypnos' realm, held in the arms of stillness, beneath the eternal watch of the gods. The hush of night had wrapped the city of Athens like a warm himation. Most households were silent now, and the stars above shone steadily, like ancient eyes watching from beyond the sky. Yet before full rest came, one final ritual remained, a quiet gesture shared across generations, carried from the grand temples to the humblest homes, the evening offering to the gods. In the dim stillness of their dwelling, the family of Themistokles moved with solemnity. No words needed to be spoken. Each knew the rhythm of this nightly act. The household altar, nothing grand, just a small stone ledge tucked into a wall niche, stood ready, holding traces of past offerings, a smudge of ash, a few dried petals, a carved terracotta figure of Hestia, goddess of the hearth and home. Themistokles knelt beside the altar with his father. The flickering light of the oil lamp shimmered across the boy's face as he looked up at the tiny statue, its features worn smooth by years of prayer and smoke. He held a pinch of barley in one hand, and with a calm breath, he offered it forward, sprinkling it gently onto the altar. This was not a sacrifice of wealth or pride. It was a gesture of gratitude. A way of saying, "Thank you for this day. Please watch over us through the night." The Greeks did not view sleep as a break from life, but as a mysterious journey, sometimes even a dangerous one. They believed spirits wandered in dreams. Some friendly, others less so. And the gods could speak to you, if they willed it. His father followed, offering a few drops of unmixed wine from a shallow dish. The scent rose slightly in the air, sharp, earthy, sacred. He murmured a few lines of thanks to Zeus, king of the gods, and to Athena, patron of their city. The words weren't loud, nor elaborate. Just enough to touch the air, like a breeze passing through leaves. Themistokles' mother added her own quiet gesture, a piece of honeyed fig, small but precious, placed at the foot of the altar with care. Then she bowed her head and whispered a prayer to Artemis, protector of women and children. Her voice, if heard at all, would have sounded like a breeze rustling through olive trees. The final act came from the grandmother. Her hands, frail yet steady, reached for a small bit of incense. It was myrrh, crumbled into powder and placed onto a burning coal. A gentle wisp of smoke rose into the room, sweet, smoky, ancient. It curled and danced upward, like a spirit being born. The smell carried memories older than words, of temples on hilltops, of childhood blessings, of nights long forgotten. For a few moments, no one moved. The family simply watched the smoke rise, letting it settle in their minds like dew on the morning grass. In that moment, the room felt timeless. It could have been any century. Any age. Any small Athenian household giving thanks to the invisible forces that governed the world. After the offering, the altar was gently covered with a soft cloth. The lamp was left to burn for a little longer, just until the smoke of the incense faded. This light, the family believed, would protect the home while they slept. It was a signal to the gods, "We remember you, even in the silence of night." Themistokles returned to his bedding, his thoughts quiet, his body calm. He lay flat on his back for a moment, staring at the wooden beams above, tracing their lines with his eyes until they blurred. He thought of the gods he had just spoken to, not as distant rulers, but as old friends watching from the sky. His father lay beside him on a mat of woven reeds, his breathing already steady. His mother curled near the hearth, covered by a light blanket. The grandmother rested not far away, her thin frame almost one with the floor. Outside, the sounds of Athens had faded completely. The wind whispered through cypress trees. A lone owl called from the Acropolis. Far off, the waves of the Aegean coast lapped softly against the rocks, like the slow heartbeat of the earth. Inside the house, the oil lamp dimmed a little more, its flame shrinking, yawning, preparing to rest. The scent of incense lingered, sweet and ancient, enveloping the home like a protective veil. And then came the final stillness. No more movement. No more sounds. Just breath. Just peace. Just the rhythm of sleep beginning to take hold, one body at a time. For the Greeks, sleep was not only a necessity. It was a sacred transition, a passage into the unknown, guided by the kindness of the gods, watched over by dreams, carried gently on the wings of Hypnos. And tonight, as the last light vanished and the family sank into slumber, all was exactly as it should be. The home had grown silent, its breath slowed with the sleep of its inhabitants. Outside, the moon cast soft silver light across the tiled roofs, and the quiet world of Athens rested in stillness. But though eyes were closed and limbs still, the journey of the mind had only just begun. To the ancient Greeks, sleep was never merely absence, it was a sacred voyage. They believed dreams could reveal truths, whisper warnings, or even grant blessings. And at the center of this unseen world stood Hypnos, the gentle god of sleep, whose temple was said to exist in the far west, beyond the land of the living. Themistokles, his body now warm and relaxed beneath his woolen blanket, slipped gently into this realm. In his dream, he found himself walking along a path lined with tall poppies, their petals soft and red as dusk. The air smelled of warm earth and crushed herbs. Each step felt like floating, and the silence here was deep and soothing, like a slow-moving river. He walked toward a great cave, its mouth covered in soft moss and flowering vines. This, he somehow knew, was the sacred home of Hypnos. There were no guards, no doors. Just the heavy scent of sleep, and an overwhelming calm that settled over him like a cloak. Inside, the cave was vast but warm. Padded with feathers, woven mats, and cushions of every shape. The walls shimmered with a light that had no source, as if peace itself had become visible. There were no torches, no fires, just a soft glow that curved around the stone like moonlight caught in smoke. In the heart of the chamber sat Hypnos himself. He was not fearsome. He did not tower. He was still and beautiful, his eyes closed, his expression peaceful. His hair flowed like night, and in his lap rested a bundle of dreams, wrapped in silken cloth and tied with a golden thread. Around him fluttered his sons, the Oneiroi, the dream spirits. Each carried a scroll or a bowl or a plume. They moved like shadows, shaping the dreams of mortals, painting memories, folding time. Themistokles was not afraid. Hypnos opened one eye, just slightly, and a soft smile crept across his lips. He gestured gently, and Oneiros approached, offering Themistokles a dream wrapped in pale blue silk. The boy reached out and accepted it. The dream unfolded before him, not a story of war or fire, but of home. Of laughter in the courtyard, of his mother's hands kneading bread, of his father's voice humming as he worked wood. Of his grandmother's tales and the warmth of shared prayers. He drifted inside that dream like a bird in the wind. It felt both real and distant. It was a reflection of his life, seen through a lens made of moonlight and memory. The Greeks held great respect for dreams. They believed some came from mere imagination, but others, from the gods, held deeper truths. Temples called asclepions were scattered across the land where the sick and weary came to sleep in sacred chambers, hoping for dreams that would offer healing or guidance. Even in the simplicity of his household, Themistokles had heard such stories. Of men who dreamed of herbs and woke to find cures. Of women who saw their future children in slumber. Of warriors warned of danger in visions brought by the Oneiroi. As he lay dreaming now, the faint scent of incense still lingered in his nostrils, tied to the memory of the offerings. His body was still, but his spirit wandered freely, exploring landscapes built not of stone, but of meaning. He dreamed of running across fields where the grass never ended, of climbing steps carved into clouds, of listening to animals speak in voices like his own. And in every dream, there was peace, not excitement, not confusion, but a soft clarity. Outside the dream, the night moved forward. The moon reached its highest point, then began its slow descent. The oil lamp, long extinguished, left only the cool silver of starlight to guard the house. Inside, Themistokles stirred slightly in his sleep, his face calm. His fingers, still curled around his carved wooden horse, twitched once, then fell still again. The dream was fading now, slowly, like mist under morning light. Hypnos' cave retreated, the poppies closed, and the boy's breath deepened. In this world, all was still. But in the dream world, a gift had been given. Hypnos, ever kind and ever silent, had left his mark, a trace of softness, a shadow of blessing. Themistokles would remember none of it clearly. But he would wake feeling rested, protected, whole. And so the family slept, not just in body, but in soul. Guided by dream spirits, watched by ancient gods, carried through the night on currents deeper than any sea. The hour was deep, far past dusk, yet not quite the edge of dawn. All across Athens, the city lay bathed in a velvet silence, broken only by the smallest, gentlest sounds. The torchlight that once flickered in alleyways had burned low. The last murmurs of taverns and temples had vanished into memory. Themistokles slept soundly, as did his family, but beyond the safe walls of their home, the city itself continued its quiet rituals. Athens, even at night, had a soul, a rhythm of breath that matched the sleeping hearts of its people. Outside, the stone streets were cooled by the breath of the earth. They had spent the day basking in sunlight and now released that warmth slowly, like a sigh. Moonlight spilled across marble columns and courtyards, softening their sharp edges into ghostly silver. The great Acropolis rose above the city like a silent sentinel, its temples glowing faintly beneath the stars. A watchman passed near Themistokles' home. His sandals made soft, measured scuffs against the stone. He carried a staff tipped with bronze and a small oil lamp that cast a trembling halo around his feet. He was not in a hurry. His duty was not to chase but to observe, to keep the order of the sleeping city, to honor the peace of night. He paused briefly by a household altar built into a street wall. It bore a tiny carved image of Hermes, god of travelers and boundaries. The watchman touched his fingers to his forehead in silent respect and moved on. In ancient Greece, boundaries were sacred, not just of land, but of time. Day to night. Wakefulness to sleep. Each had its guardian. Down another lane, a cat slinked across a rooftop, its tail swaying gently. It paused to listen, ears twitching, before leaping into the shadows. Animals, too, had their place in the dream world of night. In myths, they were messengers, sometimes of gods, sometimes of fates yet to come. In the distance, the soft bleating of a goat echoed from a nearby courtyard. A few homes on the city's edge still kept livestock within their stone enclosures, guarded by low walls and sleeping dogs. Even these creatures sensed the stillness. Their movements were small, their sounds low, as if they, too, revered the mystery of night. On the hills just beyond the city, small temple fires glowed in flickers. Some priests stayed awake through the night, keeping vigil, reading omens in the stars or pouring slow offerings of wine and oil into sacred bowls. These rituals were not loud. They were as soft as the turning of the moon. Prayers whispered to deities like Selene, goddess of the moon, or Morpheus, the bringer of dreams. Back in the heart of Athens, water trickled gently from a public fountain. Fed by ancient aqueducts, the fountain's stream was constant, day and night. A quiet promise of life. The Greeks believed that water was sacred. It was not merely a need, it was a connection to the divine. Some would wash their hands before prayer, even in the dark hours, to greet the gods in cleanliness. The city was resting, yet still alive. Each stone wall, each silent column, each sleeping figure, together they formed a chorus of stillness. Not empty. Not abandoned. But filled with intention. The Greeks did not fear the night. They walked with it, prayed with it, dreamed within it. Back in his small home, Themistokles stirred slightly. He did not wake. A shadow passed across the room as the moon moved gently above the courtyard. The boy's hand curled tighter around his carved horse. Perhaps, in his dreams, he too wandered the nighttime streets, barefoot, fearless, floating between temples and stars. There was a magic in these hours that could not be captured in words. It was the space between stories. The breath between thoughts. It was when the gods drew closest, not to strike or speak, but to simply watch. To listen. To linger. As the night deepened, the city's breath slowed even more. The lamps, one by one, guttered and died. Only the stars remained, unchanged, eternal. They spun slowly in the sky, as they always had, their light falling upon marble and clay, upon olive trees and rooftops, upon children like Themistokles who slept without fear beneath their watch. Soon, even the owls grew quiet. The wind hushed its voice. And Athens, sacred and old, slept entirely, folded in the arms of history, held gently in the palm of night. In the heart of every ancient Greek home, there was one sacred place that never truly slept, the hearth. Long after voices had faded and footsteps ceased, its warmth remained, pulsing like a quiet heartbeat in the center of the house. It was not just a source of heat. It was a living symbol of family, of unity, of the presence of the goddess Hestia. In Themistokles' home, the hearth had burned low. The firewood, earlier fed with care, had reduced to glowing coals. No flames danced now, only soft embers, their orange light breathing slowly beneath a thin layer of ash. It was enough. More than enough. The room felt calm beneath their glow, the air still and scented faintly of warmth and olive oil. Even as the city slept, the hearth offered its vigil. The goddess Hestia, though rarely depicted in dramatic myths, was revered in every household. She was the first to receive offerings and the last to be thanked before rest. Her power was not in thunder or war, but in constancy. In the silent warmth of the fire that always remained. In the space where stories were shared and prayers were whispered. Themistokles, though deep in sleep, rested not far from the hearth. Its glow reached him, softening the lines of his face, wrapping him in an invisible safety. Children, it was said, were especially dear to Hestia. Their dreams flowed more smoothly in homes where the hearth was honored. And in this home, it always was. Earlier in the evening, Themistokles' mother had tended the fire with reverent hands. She'd added a few dry twigs, just enough to keep the embers alive, and traced a small circle in the ash with her finger, a symbol of protection, simple and old. She had not spoken while she did it. The hearth required no fanfare, only respect. Now, in this late hour, the room basked in the quiet gift of its presence. Shadows played gently across the low walls, their edges soft, never sharp. The orange light flickered in the polished bronze of a water jug. It cast a warm shimmer on the clay bowls stacked neatly on a shelf. Everything glowed as if held in a dream. Outside, the wind stirred lightly, whispering through fig branches and around the corners of the house. But inside, the hearth was the anchor. It did not flicker in fear. It did not shift. It stayed, steady, comforting, timeless. That in larger homes and public buildings, there were greater fires, communal hearths that never went out, watched over by chosen maidens or city priests. In temples dedicated to Hestia, the flame was eternal. Even in the grand cities, the spirit of the home fire was never lost. Each flame, large or small, was seen as part of a greater whole, each hearth a piece of a sacred, living web. In larger homes and public buildings, there were greater fires, communal hearths that never went out, watched over by chosen maidens or city priests. In temples dedicated to Hestia, the flame was eternal. Even in the grand cities, the spirit of the home fire was never lost. Each flame, large or small, was seen as part of a greater whole, each hearth a piece of a sacred, living web. Beyond the walls of the home, the courtyard breathed quietly beneath the stars. In the stillness of the night, it became a sacred space, more open than the hearth, more natural than the stone rooms around it. It was a bridge between the comfort of home and the vast, dreaming sky. For many ancient Greeks, this central courtyard was not merely an architectural feature, it was a place of soul and air and memory. Themistokles' courtyard had grown cool. The stones beneath the olive tree had shed their warmth, and a faint breeze stirred the leaves with a sound like soft whispering silk. Moonlight dappled through the branches, landing in pale pools across the flagstones. Here, the air was full of scent, faint myrtle, dried fig leaves, a hint of last season's pomegranate blossom. Though all were asleep, the courtyard remained watchful. It was part of the rhythm of the home. It had witnessed joy, arguments, prayers, meals, laughter. And now, in the deep night, it stood in reverence, waiting silently for the world to turn once more. Near the center, the household's small well sat capped and covered. Its stone rim glowed faintly in the moonlight. In the early morning, it would be uncovered again, and the family would draw water for washing and drinking. But at night, it rested like everything else. The Greeks believed that wells were more than water sources, they were entrances to the underworld, to deeper realms of mystery. At night, they were left undisturbed. A clay pot of basil stood nearby, swaying gently in the wind. Themistokles had planted it with his mother just before spring. Now, its leaves curled toward the moon, cool and green and fragrant. It had no need for sunlight now. It drank the hush. A sleeping cat, curled near the wall, stretched once and settled deeper into slumber. Her coat was striped and worn, her body lean from prowling. She had found her place in the house months ago and never left. Themistokles had named her Thalia, after one of the muses. She was a quiet shadow, a part of the home's rhythm. From time to time, the wind passed over the rooftop, sending a soft rustle through the courtyard. The leaves shivered, the shadows shifted. Then stillness returned. It was not the stillness of nothing, but of deep listening. As if the stones and trees and walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something beyond words. In ancient times, the courtyard was where morning prayers were often made. Where neighbors might greet one another through adjoining walls. Where children played, and elders sat with folded hands. But at night, it belonged to something greater, something slower. It was said that dreams sometimes wandered into courtyards. That the gods might pass through quietly, choosing not to disturb the home, but to linger just at its edge. That shadows seen in the corner of the eye were not always tricks of light, but old spirits checking in on familiar families. In Themistokles' dream, he wandered through this very courtyard, barefoot, weightless, drifting between potted plants and vines. The night air touched his cheeks like cool linen. He looked up at the stars and saw constellations shift and dance. Orion winked. Cassiopeia turned her head. The sky was alive. And in the center of the courtyard, where the moonlight gathered brightest, he saw something that made his dream self pause. A figure stood there, not frightening, not grand. Just calm. Draped in a silver robe, with hands open. Perhaps it was a vision of Hypnos. Perhaps it was only his own longing made shape. But the figure smiled gently, then faded into air, leaving only the quiet and the stars. Back in the waking world, the real courtyard lay quiet and empty, its stones catching dew in small sparkling beads. The fig tree stretched upward, its branches unmoved. The scent of earth had deepened. No gods walked there now, but their presence could be felt, if one were still enough. In time, the breeze settled. The stars spun slowly onward. And the courtyard, still and open, held its place in the night's great lullaby. As the night deepened, and the sky turned even darker above Athens, a presence remained, unseen, but never absent. For in the quiet of the sleeping household, beyond the walls and resting bodies, beyond even the soft flicker of the hearth, the gods of the home still lingered. The ancient Greeks lived with gods close by. Not just in distant temples or grand statues, but in the very corners of their dwellings. Small figures carved from wood or clay, etched into stone, or whispered about as shadows passed over doorways. These household gods were not feared. They were familiar. Protective. Patient. In the home of Themistokles, these sacred presences were honored daily. But at night, they were not forgotten. As the family slept, so too did the guardians who watched over them. Not in slumber like mortals, but in stillness, like statues that breathed quietly with the rhythm of the house. Near the threshold stood a small figure of Hermes, god of boundaries and travelers. His presence marked the line between the outside world and the safety within. Every visitor who crossed the family's doorway had passed beneath his gaze. And now, as moonlight traced the doorway's edge, Hermes remained still, his stone form dappled in silver. By the hearth, a tiny altar to Hestia still glowed faintly with the memory of the evening's flame. Her presence was always there, soft and warm, like the air after bread has been baked. She needed no great temple. Her power was in constancy, in the echo of laughter and lullabies, in the way a home breathes as its family sleeps. In a corner shelf stood a small terracotta owl, painted long ago by a skilled hand. This was not just decoration, it represented Athena, protector of the city, wisdom giver, and guardian of those who learned and dreamed. Themistokles had once asked if the owl watched his dreams. His grandmother had smiled and said, "Only the ones that matter." There were other spirits too. Less defined, less named. The Greeks spoke of Lares and Penates, spirits of the hearth and pantry, of ancestors, of the very foundation stones. They were not always seen, but they were always felt. In the creak of the wood, the hush of the curtain, the coolness of a clay wall at night. And on this night, they were all present. Outside, the moon had begun its slow descent toward the western hills. The stars twinkled softer now, and a faint violet tint brushed the horizon. But inside, all was still. The home had become a vessel for rest, holding within it generations of belief and quiet strength. Themistokles, still curled in sleep, breathed softly. His brow was relaxed, and the wooden horse at his side had slipped to the floor, resting in a patch of moonlight. Around him, the air was thick with silence, not heavy, not oppressive, but sacred. The kind of silence that listens. That protects. In dreams, the gods could visit. In sleep, the body opened to messages not always understood, but always remembered in some form. A scent. A shiver. A warmth in the chest. Themistokles would not recall specifics in the morning, but he would wake feeling watched over. His father, his mother, and his grandmother all lay in their chosen places, their bodies turned toward walls or hearth or courtyard, each wrapped in their own dreams. They did not toss. They did not wake. The night was kind to them. Even the wind had quieted. The shutters barely moved. The olives on the tree in the courtyard hung still, their shadows motionless. The dog outside, who sometimes barked at passing foxes, now lay curled beside a wall, paws tucked under chin, utterly peaceful. The gods of the house did not sleep, but they did rest. They observed without judgment. They waited without need. They existed in the dust of the floor, the curve of a stair, the breath of a child. And they would remain when morning came. When the coals were stirred again. When the first voice rose into the echo of the new day. When the offerings were laid and the sandals were strapped. But for now, they stood silent guard over a sleeping family. Steady as stone. Gentle as a breeze. And all through the house, nothing moved, except the soft rising and falling of peaceful breath, the rhythm of sleep cradled by gods. As the night wore on and the first blush of morning remained far beyond the horizon, the world inside the home shifted, subtly, delicately, toward the sacred terrain of dreams. In ancient Greece, sleep was not merely a rest of the body. It was a passage. A gentle descent into another realm, governed by the god Hypnos, the twin of Thanatos, and the brother of Morpheus, god of dreams. To the Greeks, dreams were messages, gifts, and sometimes warnings. They came clothed in mystery, bearing the voices of the gods or the echoes of one's own soul. So, sleep was not taken lightly. It was honored. Prepared for. Welcomed as one would welcome a guest from the divine. Earlier that evening, Themistokles' mother had sprinkled lavender and dried bay leaves near the window of the sleeping area. The scent now drifted faintly in the cool air, soft, earthy, soothing. It was believed that such herbs calmed the mind and kept away disturbing spirits. Not all dreams were pleasant, after all, and certain protections were wise. His grandmother had also placed a small pouch of crushed chamomile beneath her pillow. Not for its flavor, but for its symbolism. Chamomile was a gentle flower, associated with rest and clarity. The old woman believed it helped the mind untie its knots before sleep. She often said, "Let your worries slide like olive oil over marble." Themistokles had no herbs under his head, but he had his own rituals. Before lying down, he'd rubbed his fingers over the worn ridges of his wooden horse 3 times, once for safety, once for dreams, and once just because it felt right. No one had taught him that. It was something he'd made up. And yet, in this quiet hour, it seemed as ancient and sacred as any temple rite. In another corner of the house, his father had wrapped himself in a heavier woolen cloak. He preferred to sleep with his back to the door, facing the hearth, even when the fire had died down. "Let me dream facing the heart of the home," he'd once said. It gave him comfort. A connection to the warmth of family, even in the depths of sleep. All across the house, the body language of sleep had taken hold. Fingers curled slightly. Breaths came slower. Feet softened. Faces smoothed. No one tossed or murmured tonight. It was a deep, still night, the kind that settled into the bones and left its peace behind in the morning. That I and the mythology of ancient Greece, the entrance to the world of dreams lay through 2 gates, one of horn and one of ivory. The gate of horn led through true dreams, those that spoke of real things or divine messages. The gate of ivory led through false dreams, illusions and distractions. No one could choose which gate their dreams would pass through. They could only prepare the soul to receive what came with calmness and humility. And so, in the quiet of the home, under the roof beams carved by ancestors long gone, each sleeper was preparing, unconsciously, inwardly, for whatever dreams the gods might send. Outside, the night deepened even further. The stars turned their slow dance overhead. A faint owl called once from a distant fig tree and was answered by another. Their voices, soft and low, passed over the rooftops like drifting fog. The dog outside stirred only briefly, then tucked her nose beneath her tail once more. Even the insects seemed to quiet, as if they too were slipping into a collective hush. The world, for this small moment, was entirely at peace. Themistokles' mind began to unspool, drifting from thoughts of the day to images without weight, floating sandals, spinning coins, a boat of stars crossing a black sea. His body was still, but inside him, a journey had begun. Toward the lands where stories grow in silence. Where gods walk without names. Where the soul rests in colors and shapes and half-remembered voices. In this moment, the home was a cradle. A nest tucked into the greater nest of the world. Each heartbeat within it echoed softly through the night. Each breath a prayer, unspoken but heard. The Greeks believed that dreams could be more than simple fancies. They could be omens. Insights. Dialogues with the divine. That belief gave every slumber a sense of sacred purpose. Not just rest, but revelation. And so, the house lay in silence, bathed in the faintest silver light, wrapped in the invisible arms of gods and ancestors and sleep itself. No doors would creak. No wind would stir. The dreams had begun to arrive. By this time in the night, the world had grown stiller than still, so still that even the silence had a texture, like thick velvet draped over the stones, the walls, the bodies at rest. The hour was deep. It was the kind of hour that does not speak in sound, but in presence. It weighed lightly, like a blanket woven from shadow and time. In the home of Themistokles, nothing stirred. No coals glowed now. The hearth was dark. The scent of charred olive wood had faded into the background, lingering only in memory and breath. Outside the window, the moon was lowering. The stars above Athens shimmered like they had for thousands of years, unchanged and eternal, indifferent to the passage of human life, yet always watching. This hour, the Greeks believed, belonged to the old spirits, the ones who traveled on the edges of dreams. They did not disturb or demand. They were watchers. Listeners. They moved softly, like wind between cypress trees or a finger brushed across a closed eye. Even the animals knew to be silent now. The cat, Thalia, had curled deeper into herself, her breath rising in a steady rhythm. The dog outside had not lifted her head in hours. The birds were silent. The insects had dimmed their hum. It was as though nature itself had paused, leaning into this moment of complete surrender. Within the family's modest home, the shape of slumber held everything. Themistokles, small beneath his wool blanket, had sunk deeply into sleep. His mouth slightly open, fingers curled, wooden horse dropped beside him. His face, usually so full of questions and laughter, was now smooth and quiet. A dreaming face. His mother slept on her side, one hand beneath her cheek. Her hair, loose now, spread over the woven mat like ink spilled in slow motion. Her dreams were steady, uncomplicated. She had worked hard that day, grinding grain, washing the child, praying at the altar. Now she rested in the reward of stillness. His father, always the last to fall asleep, had finally given in. The weight of the week, the pull of night, and the softness of his place near the hearth had brought him down like a stone into water. Deep, unmoving rest. His hands were folded, as if still thinking. But his breath told the truth. He was gone to another world, and the grandmother, old and quiet and gentle as a tree in winter, slept with a calm that seemed to have ripened over many decades. She had known many nights like this. She had watched the stars for years. Her sleep was not just a need, it was a gift. She slept the way old people do, with both detachment and devotion. The house held all of them, and more than them, it held memory. For this was a home that had seen many nights. It had been built by hands now gone, warmed by voices long silenced. The stones knew things. The beams remembered laughter and cries, footsteps and songs. The walls had held the worries of generations, and tonight, they held peace. The Greeks spoke of Nyx, the goddess of night. She was not just darkness, but something deeper, a force of power and mystery, feared even by Zeus. They believed her wings spread across the sky each evening, brushing the earth into quiet. She moved invisibly now through the alleys of Athens, past oil lamps and olive trees, past the Acropolis and sleeping goats, and into the homes of the humble and the noble alike. Tonight, Nyx had passed through here too. She had touched the brows of the family and hushed them. She had dipped her hands into the courtyard's cool water and let its echo spread inward. She had swept her fingers across the windowsill, leaving a quietness that reached all the way into the soul. This, then, was the full bloom of nightfall. Not dusk. Not late evening. But the hour when even time seemed to pause and hold its breath. And so the family dreamed on. Nothing moved. Nothing called. Nothing cried out. Only the weightless weight of the night remained. Like an old lullaby, whispered without sound, wrapping every body, every stone, every breath in its long and perfect hush. The moon had now passed its highest point and begun its slow descent toward the western sky. Its light, no longer sharp and commanding, had grown gentle, silver softened by time. It poured into the courtyard of the small Athenian home, washing over clay walls and olive leaves like water, like memory. In ancient Greece, the courtyard was the quiet heart of the house. During the day, it rang with voices and footfalls, the scraping of amphorae, the chatter of birds. But at night, it became something else entirely. A sanctuary. A well of silence. A space for the stars to visit. Tonight, it slept just as deeply as the family within. A faint breeze whispered across the flagstones. It stirred the leaves of the old fig tree in one corner, and brushed against the linen draped to dry earlier and forgotten in the hush of evening routines. The fabric barely moved, only enough to remind the air that it was real, that it had form. A small bowl left beside the water basin still held a few drops of olive oil, placed there as an offering earlier that evening. The moonlight caught the surface of the oil and turned it into a pool of shifting silver. In the quiet beliefs of the household, this small act, this gift of oil, kept the household gods pleased. It welcomed peace. It was the kind of ritual no longer discussed aloud, but still lovingly remembered in action. Shadows played gently along the floor of the courtyard. They belonged to nothing and everything. The outline of a beam, the silhouette of a jug, the soft reach of the fig tree's branches all danced slowly under the night sky. It was not a dance with rhythm, but one with presence, shadows moving like thoughts in half-sleep. A sleeping tortoise rested near the base of the garden wall. It had wandered in weeks ago and decided to stay. Themistokles called it Achilles, and fed it bits of fig in the morning. Tonight, Achilles was still, a tiny dome of quiet life, its breath slower than the night itself. On the far side of the courtyard, a lizard crept along the edge of a sun-warmed tile. Even it moved slowly now, as though feeling the gravity of sleep all around. There was no urgency, no fear. Just the quiet pulse of life that continues even when all else rests. High above, the stars wheeled across the sky in silence. The Greeks gave them names, stories, constellations. They were more than lights, they were gods and monsters, lovers and hunters, scattered in the heavens by ancient myths. And tonight, they looked down upon the sleeping home with calm eyes. Themistokles' window faced the courtyard. Though his eyes were closed, his dreams seemed to echo its quiet. In his mind, there were open skies and wide spaces, rooms filled with light, and gentle footsteps on sun-warmed stones. Whether he knew it or not, the rhythm of the courtyard had slipped into his sleep. Sometimes, his grandmother said, the courtyard held the soul of the house. Not the rooms. Not the hearth. But this open space, where sky met stone. She said the gods walked here in the dark, gods too small for temples, too quiet for hymns, but no less divine. Tonight, they walked gently. There was no need to speak. No need to be seen. They passed between the fig leaves and under the eaves, brushing the air with a touch no one would feel, except perhaps in a deeper breath, a dream that lingered, a sudden sense of calm that arrived uninvited and stayed. And so the courtyard held its quiet, held its moonlight, held its stories and memories and breathless hush. It did not call for attention. It did not boast. It simply was, there, beneath the sky, in the middle of the home, holding everything in place as the night moved softly forward. As the night deepened even further, and the stars wheeled silently above the rooftops of Athens, the dreams of the sleeping family drifted like incense through the still air. Some dreams were shapeless, like warm mist curling around the soul. Others arrived clothed in the garments of memory, half-truth, or ancient story. In ancient Greece, dreams were often believed to be messages from the gods, or, at least, shaped by their invisible hands. They could comfort or confuse, offer warnings or delight, and they were never to be taken lightly. Many even sought out dreams through ritual and prayer, sleeping in sacred temples hoping for divine insight. The practice was called incubation, and it was as old as belief itself. Themistokles, though only a child, had heard such tales from his grandmother's voice by lamplight. She spoke often of the sanctuary of Asclepios, the god of healing. Pilgrims would walk days to lie down in the cool stillness of his temple. There, in the sacred quiet, they would wait for a dream, a healing dream, a guiding dream. Some claimed they felt the god himself brush their forehead as they slept. Others awoke with new clarity or hope. Tonight, Themistokles dreamed as well. In his dream, he walked a marble path glowing under moonlight. Cypress trees lined the way, tall and silent, their branches heavy with sleep. A white bird flew overhead, slow, without sound, its wings parting the night like pages of a book. He followed it without question, down steps carved from ancient stone. The temple appeared, not grand but inviting, shaped like memory itself. Columns rose like sleeping giants. An open doorway flickered with golden light inside. He stepped in, barefoot and curious. The floor was warm, like sunlit sand, though no sun shone. Inside the dream temple, voices whispered, not loud, not in fear, but in welcome. They did not speak in language. They sang in feeling. Themistokles walked slowly, reverently, until he reached a sleeping figure laid upon a raised stone. He realized, with that strange certainty that only dreams provide, that it was himself. And yet, he was still awake in the dream. Watching. Listening. A figure approached from the shadows, a man with eyes like deep wells and robes that shimmered like flowing water. Was it Asclepios? Or his own grandfather? Or no one at all? The figure reached out and gently touched the brow of the sleeping child. Themistokles felt it on his real forehead too, soft, cool, and full of something ancient. Peace, perhaps. Or knowing. Then the temple dissolved. And the dream floated onward, through olive groves, past singing rivers, into skies filled with horses made of stars. He felt no fear, no question. Only drifting, and quiet. Outside the dream, his real body turned slightly beneath the wool blanket. A single deep breath escaped him, as though something inside had been released. His fingers relaxed further. In the nearby room, his grandmother stirred. Perhaps she too dreamed of temples, of sacred hills where gods once walked among the myrtle trees, of stories she heard as a child from her own mother's mouth. Her breath was deep and slow, like ocean waves. The dreams of the family were their own, private and unseen. Yet in that quiet home, they all seemed to drift on the same current, as if touched by the same wind, the same unseen whisper passed through each sleeping soul. Even the house itself, old and knowing, seemed to dream. The roof groaned faintly in the coolness. A small pebble rolled gently across the courtyard, as though guided by nothing but silence. These were not hours of action, but of transformation. The soul, the Greeks believed, traveled during sleep. It walked strange roads, gathered strange knowledge, and returned before dawn. Sometimes with answers. Sometimes only with calm. And so the night held them all, bodies in one world, spirits in another. A household drifting peacefully between realms. The stars outside remained steady. The constellations moved inch by inch. Orion stood tall, his belt glittering. Lyra sang in silence. Pegasus, great winged horse, galloped through darkness. And down below, in the soft breath of night, myth and sleep mingled, until even the air felt like a temple, and the dreams like prayers answered in the hush. In a quiet corner of the home, just off from the hearth and beside the low wall of the dining area, stood a simple wooden shelf. It wasn't grand or ornate. Its legs were uneven. One of its planks bore the scars of a long-forgotten scorch mark. But it had stood in that place longer than Themistokles had been alive, and possibly longer than his father. It was the pottery shelf. During the day, it held everyday tools of living, small terracotta bowls, a shallow black-glazed dish used for olives, a narrow-mouthed jug for wine, and two mismatched drinking cups, each with fading patterns of dolphins and vines. At night, though, the shelf became something else entirely. When the fire had gone to embers and the air grew cool, the pottery seemed to settle into stillness. Each piece seemed to hum faintly, not with sound, but with memory. One could almost feel it, standing near the shelf in the hush of night. The faint echo of conversations it had witnessed, of hands that had lifted and washed and filled each vessel, of years passing like shadows across a stone. The Greeks believed that objects had character, not just purpose, but presence. Especially those shaped by human hands. A cup made by a potter's will held more than water. It held breath, intention, the moment of its creation. These everyday items, so easily overlooked, were companions through life's rhythms. Tonight, moonlight from the courtyard stretched across the floor and landed softly on the edge of the shelf. It lit the curve of a kylix, the shallow drinking cup used during symposia, and caught the rim of a small oil lamp, whose wick had burned low hours before. The oil lamp was especially quiet. Earlier, it had been used in the evening's gentle rituals. Now, it rested like a sleeping eye. Beside it, a slender amphora, too small for transport, likely used to hold herbs, stood proud, though it leaned slightly to one side. On its surface, the painted lines had faded with time, but still suggested the image of a lyre player in mid-song. Even in sleep, it sang quietly in the dark. Themistokles' father had once told him, in a rare moment of softness, that if you listen to old pottery in the middle of the night, you can hear the stories it's kept hidden. Not in words. Not in voices. But in silence that feels full. Tonight, that silence stretched all through the house. The pottery shelf, though silent, seemed to hold more life than ever. Perhaps it was the warmth still trapped in the clay from the day's sun. Or the way the air moved slightly between the pieces, as though respecting their ancient dignity. Or perhaps it was simply that, in this hour of stillness, the mind becomes more open to what is quiet, what is gentle, what is old. Somewhere in the distance, a single owl called, low, steady, thoughtful. The sound slipped into the house like a guest who knew the way, passed across the shelf, and moved on. And all the while, the family slept on. Themistokles, curled near his carved horse, did not stir. His breathing matched the rhythm of the household, steady and slow. His mother's hair was spread out across the mat like woven silk. His father, always weary, looked at peace in sleep. His grandmother, ancient and gentle, slept with hands crossed neatly over her chest, as though cradling a memory. Outside, the stars continued their silent turning. Inside, the shelf of pottery, humble, quiet, and filled with 1,000 unnoticed moments, stood watch. It was neither sacred nor mundane. Just real. Just there. And sometimes, in the softest part of the night, that is all something needs to be, there. Witnessing. Holding space. Remembering. Resting. And in doing so, it becomes something more. In the quietest hour of night, when even the fig leaves no longer rustled and the moon began its gentle descent behind the hill, something stirred with grace and certainty across the tiled floor. It was a cat. She was small, lithe, and patterned like pale smoke, gray with darker stripes that melted into the night. No one remembered exactly when she had appeared. Perhaps she'd been born under the floorboards, or wandered in from the olive groves beyond the city walls. But in the manner of all cats, she had claimed the house as hers long before the family knew they'd been chosen. By day, she was almost invisible. She disappeared into sunbeams or perched quietly in doorways like a carved figurine. By evening, she became more present, greeting her people with a lift of the tail, curling around ankles, or silently leaping to ledges no one else would dare climb. But at night, she truly came alive. Now, in the deep stillness, she moved with perfect silence. Her paws made no sound as she padded across the cool tiles of the main room. Her tail brushed against a wall in passing, and her nose lifted briefly into the air to catch the subtle trails of sleeping bodies, warm blankets, and faint oil smoke. To the Greeks, cats were both useful and mysterious. They kept homes free from vermin, yes, but they also carried a certain aura. They were not worshipped like in Egypt, but they were admired. In the house of Themistokles, the cat was not named, and yet everyone responded when she looked their way. Now she stepped over the threshold of the sleeping chamber, her head held low, ears flicking gently to catch the small rhythms of breath and dreams. She paused near the grandmother, where a piece of wool blanket had slipped to the floor. There, she sat, tail curled neatly, eyes blinking slowly. Not to guard. Not to wait. Simply to be. The fire had long since burned down to ash, and only a faint warmth clung to the edges of the hearth. But that warmth drifted toward her, and she moved again, gracefully, slowly, to rest in the center of it. There, she curled into a perfect spiral, paws tucked beneath her chin, tail draped like a whisper. Her breathing, too, became part of the house's rhythm. Soft in. Softer out. Themistokles' carved horse lay a few feet away, its wood smooth with use. The cat turned her head slightly toward it, then closed her eyes. She, too, was dreaming now. Perhaps of quiet gardens beneath the Acropolis, where lizards darted and olive trees cast long shadows. Perhaps of golden sunbeams on stone benches, or of long ago when her ancestors wandered temple courtyards alongside priestesses in flowing robes. Or perhaps of nothing at all, just the soft pulse of safety, the hum of a home in sleep. That a small noise, a settling creak in the roof beams, did not disturb her. Nor did the soft groan of a clay jug cooling by the hearth. She knew the house. She knew its sounds. She was part of them. Outside, a breeze passed through the courtyard again, lighter than breath. It stirred the fig leaves and sent a faint scent of earth and bark through the windows. Inside, the cat slept on. She did not twitch or stretch. She did not chase dreams with her paws. She simply rested. Entirely. Deeply. There was something sacred in her stillness, something the Greeks may have called harmonia, the balance that holds things in place when all is as it should be. Her sleep reminded the house that it, too, could exhale. And it did. The air grew softer. The night thickened like a blanket pulled gently up around tired shoulders. The stars outside, watching from their silent posts, blinked just a little dimmer. All was well. And in the warm cradle of a fire's memory, the house, the family, and the nameless little cat dreamed together. As the hours turned slowly onward and the constellations crept behind the rooftops, a quiet breeze made its way through the sleeping city. It came not with force or chill, but with a whisper, gliding gently between the narrow stone alleys and worn marble columns. It passed sleeping dogs, shuttered stalls, and vine-covered porticos. It had no destination, only presence, carrying with it the soft breath of the sea and the distant song of cicadas long since lulled into stillness. At last, the breeze arrived at the home of Themistokles. The house was small, but its courtyard lay open to the night sky. This was typical of many Greek homes, a space not just for air and light, but for thought, quiet labor, and moments of pause. By day, the courtyard would echo with footsteps and the splash of water in the basin. It might smell of thyme and ash, or of oil from the lamps refilling. But now, in the hollow silence of night, the breeze entered alone, careful not to disturb, and brought with it a gentle, sacred coolness. The courtyard was ringed with stone walls, washed in pale white and warmed by years of sun. Along one wall hung a set of drying herbs, oregano, sage, bay, and they stirred softly as the breeze moved through them, like sleeping fingers brushing leaves in a dream. Near the center of the courtyard, a large terracotta basin caught moonlight along its rim. Its surface shimmered faintly as the breeze skimmed the water, creating the smallest ripple, no more than a suggestion of motion. And there, floating lazily at the edge, a single fig leaf drifted, carried by nothing but quiet. In one corner, a clay jar sat with a cloth lid tied neatly over its mouth. Inside, the last of the evening's rainwater cooled in the night air. The breeze lingered near it, as if it too remembered the first taste of fresh water on a hot day. A broom leaned against the far wall, forgotten from its final sweep before dusk. Its bristles stirred just enough to be noticed, then returned to their stillness. Above, the stars wheeled on. In the sleeping room just beyond the courtyard's open doorway, no one stirred. Themistokles' hand had fallen slightly from beneath his blanket. His palm faced upward, open to the ceiling, as if waiting to catch the dreams drifting down from the stars. His breath was slow and deep. The breeze, curious but gentle, slipped inside. It touched nothing. It merely passed, over the sleeping family, across the rim of the empty bowl, along the edge of the wooden bench where sandals had been neatly tucked. To the Greeks, air was sacred. They called it air, not just wind, but the very breath of the world. It moved between the visible and the invisible, the tangible and the divine. Philosophers believed it to be one of the elements of life, and some thought the soul itself was a kind of wind. An internal breeze stirred by the gods. Tonight, the night breeze carried the hush of the city, the memory of the sea, the warmth of the day's sun, and the prayers left unspoken. It was not in a rush. It was not bold. It merely was. And sometimes, that is all a thing needs to be, passing, soft, unnoticed except by the heart. As it left the house, the breeze curled upward, into the fig tree growing just beside the doorway. The tree had watched the family for many years, rooted in silence. It rustled gently now, not in wakefulness, but in acknowledgement. In company. The stars above dimmed slightly in their turn. And the night continued, cool, still, and utterly complete. Far from the home of Themistokles, beyond the winding lanes and shadowed columns of the sleeping city, the land stretched into low hills where shepherds once walked and olive trees grew in silence. Up there, in the hush between earth and sky, stood a small, time-worn temple. It was not a grand marble monument like those near the Agora or the Acropolis. No tourists would have stopped to gaze, and no feasts were ever held at its base. But to the nearby villagers, and to those who watched stars more than city life, it was sacred. Its columns were simple, weathered, covered with the soft green of moss in places. And yet, they stood strong, outlined now by silver starlight and the deepest hush of the night. Within the temple hung a small bronze bell. It wasn't large. It did not toll to mark time or call armies. It hung silently in the center of a wooden beam, tied with a worn leather strap. Only on rare nights, when the wind was just right, did it speak. Tonight, the wind found its way through the hills. It wound up the rocky paths, glided over patches of dry grass, and gently pressed its fingers to the bell. Ding! Just once. Soft. Clear. Not loud, but unmistakable. In the sleeping city, no one heard it. Not the guards at the gates, not the donkeys in their stalls, not even the men who studied the sky on scrolls long into the night. But the hills heard it. And in the heart of the home, Themistokles stirred slightly. He didn't wake. His eyes remained closed. But something inside him, perhaps something ancient and deep, tilted gently in response. The bell was part of a forgotten ritual, performed only at night, when the sky was quiet and the soul was closest to the gods. Some said the bell rang when a spirit passed peacefully. Others believed it welcomed dreams into the world. Whatever the truth, its sound lingered. Not as echo, but as presence. Back in the house, the fig tree in the courtyard swayed ever so slightly, as if touched by memory. The breeze, still soft, carried the ghost of the bell's chime across rooftops and quiet altars. Past the dim outline of the Parthenon, past the olive groves and starlit fields, until it reached the streets near Themistokles' home. It whispered along the stones, dipped into the courtyard, and settled like a blessing over the doorway. Inside, the pottery shelf, the carved horse, the cat, and the sleeping family, all remained in stillness. But something had changed. Not dramatically. Not in sound or movement. Only in atmosphere. As though the house itself had remembered something old and beautiful, something from before time had names. To the Greeks, music and harmony were considered signs of a well-ordered world. A single tone could express balance, the union of matter and spirit. The bell's soft chime, though fleeting, had become part of the night's great song. A song sung by stone and star, breath and clay. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, when even the stars seemed to hold their breath, there came the faintest sound of sandals brushing against stone. Not hurried. Not lost. Just walking. Measured, even, thoughtful steps. It was a man, old but upright, wrapped in a simple woolen cloak. His beard was long and gray, and he carried a small scroll under one arm. His eyes, soft and unblinking, were fixed on the horizon that had yet to glow with morning. This was Cleon, a philosopher. Not a famous one, not one whose name echoed through symposiums or was etched into marble. But one who walked nightly, thinking. He lived alone on the edge of the city, near a grove of olives, in a cottage surrounded by silence. And every evening, once the city lights had dimmed and even the inns had shuttered, he would walk. Not to go anywhere. Just to be present. He believed, like many of his kind, that the night offered something the day could not, stillness without distraction. Clarity without noise. As he passed through the narrow lanes, his steps sounded softly in the hush, slip, tap, slip, the sound of worn soles on worn stone. Cats watched him pass from windowsills. A single owl blinked slowly from a column above. In his mind, Cleon pondered questions with no answers. What is the nature of rest? Is sleep a kind of return to the self, or an escape? Do dreams speak in riddles, or do they speak in silence? Sometimes, he wrote his thoughts down. Other times, he whispered them into the dark, not expecting the night to answer. And sometimes, like tonight, he simply listened. He walked past the home of Themistokles, pausing only briefly. The house was silent. The fig tree stood still. A single oil lamp, long extinguished, sat on the outer ledge of the window. Cleon smiled. He had seen the boy once, during the day, chasing a lizard near the courtyard gate. He had seen the grandmother hanging herbs to dry. He had nodded once to the father, passing with a basket of olives. He did not know them. But he cared for them. He cared in the way that a philosopher cares, by observing, by wondering, by holding space in the mind for those who may never know they are being held. He resumed walking. Above him, the last stars clung faintly to the sky. A blush of violet crept at the edges, barely noticeable, but present. In a few hours, the city would stir. Doors would open. Feet would shuffle. Pottery would clink. But not yet. Cleon reached the edge of the temple ruins where he often sat at night. He placed his scroll beside him, folded his cloak around his knees, and stared upward. The moon was gone now. But in its place hung silence, the deep, sacred silence that only arrives once all things have settled. He did not speak. He did not need to. Because even thought, in this hour, had grown quiet. And across the rooftops and winding alleys, from one sleeping house to the next, that quiet stretched gently, like soft wool woven between hearts. The night was not over, not fully, but it had begun to release its hold. A pale softness crept over the edge of the rooftops, the kind of light that does not dazzle or declare itself, but slowly unfolds, like the waking of a child or the blooming of a flower in silence. This was the first light of dawn. Not yet sunlight, but something more delicate, a promise of warmth. A murmur of return. It touched the marble first. The outer stones of the temples, weathered by centuries of wind and time, began to shimmer faintly. Not brightly. Just enough to catch the breath of morning and hold it like a secret. In the streets, dew gathered quietly between the cracks of stone walkways. The air held the scent of olive bark, dry dust, and distant hearth smoke, an aroma that spoke of old earth and gentle lives. Themistokles slept still. In the sleeping room, a sliver of light slipped through the doorway, finding the edge of his woven blanket. It kissed the carved wooden figure on the shelf. It rested upon the small ceramic bowl still holding a trace of lavender water. The cat opened one eye. It stretched a paw slowly, then curled once more into the folds of a worn tunic at the foot of the bed. In the courtyard, the fig tree's leaves began to glow faintly green, as if remembering the sun's return. A single drop of water, gathered on a leaf's tip during the night, fell with a soft tap into the basin below. Plip. That sound echoed slightly in the stillness. Outside, a rooster crowed far away, not loudly, but distantly, as if testing the edges of the morning. And still the light grew. In the hills, the marble temples now gleamed like bones of the earth touched by the breath of Apollo himself. To the ancient Greeks, such moments were sacred. They believed that the gods stirred with the light, that Helios was pulling the sun across the sky again, guiding day into being. No trumpet would sound. No fanfare. Just light. A slow, golden hush that spilled between columns, rooftops, and clay tiles. It climbed the city wall. It pressed gently against the shutters of homes. It touched the skin of old statues and sleeping children, equally. And in time, it reached Themistokles' face. His eyes moved beneath closed lids. A breath deeper than the last rose within him, and then fell away. He did not wake yet. But his body knew. The night had passed. The earth had turned. The gods had once again kept their watch. And another day was ready to begin. The sun had not yet crested the horizon, but the world had changed. The stars, once scattered like salt across the velvet sky, had faded into memory. The moon had slipped away, its silver path swallowed by the coming warmth. The shadows, long and soft, had begun to lift from their resting places. Themistokles opened his eyes. He did not sit up right away. He simply lay still, listening. Somewhere, a bird called once, clear and singular, then fell silent again, as though it too were savoring the last moment of peace before the day's rhythm began. The boy blinked slowly. His breath was steady. Around him, the room was touched by the gentlest gold. The clay walls, the woolen cloths, the sleeping cat, the basket of dried figs, all appeared softened, as though the light itself had passed through a dream before arriving. He sat up. His feet touched the cool, smooth floor. For a while, he did nothing. There was no rush. No cry. No signal that the day must begin in haste. Only stillness. In the courtyard, his grandmother was already awake, tending silently to the small hearth. A tiny flame flickered beneath a clay pot. The scent of warm water and chamomile drifted upward, curling softly through the doorway. She did not speak when Themistokles appeared. Instead, she smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips, and gestured for him to sit. He did. And there, in that courtyard where moonlight had danced, where breezes had whispered, where fig leaves had rustled in the night, they began their morning, not with words, but with presence. He took the cup she handed him. It was simple. Worn. The clay was chipped at the rim, but still warm from the pot. He held it close, letting its steam kiss his face. Above them, the sky shifted from violet to rose. Far in the distance, the sound of a wooden wheel turning on stone echoed faintly. A vendor beginning his journey. A donkey adjusting its load. A city beginning to breathe again. But not here. Not yet. For a few precious minutes, Themistokles and his grandmother sat in a hush between night and day. In that sacred pause. That gentle crossing. No one had to speak of dreams, though he had dreamed. No one had to speak of the gods, though they had watched. The rituals of sleep, of washing, of oil, of prayer, of silence, each had passed like beads on a string, and now the final thread was tied. A new day had begun. But it began in stillness. And the stillness, like the sleep before it, would linger in the heart. Because for the ancient Greeks, the art of living well was not in rushing, nor in rising high, but in balance. In rhythm. In knowing when to act, and when simply to be. And so the day began not with sound or noise. But with warmth. With light. With breath. With the quiet echo of a night well lived. And with a boy, now awake, holding a cup of morning in his hands, still full of the peace the stars had left behind.